Hi, it's John Kelly. In this module, we are going to discuss the Standard on Quality Management 2. And as always, we want to be efficient and effective, follow professional standards, and document what we have done properly. Now, the effective date, and this is the effective date in Canada, it's an international standard which is going to have perhaps different effective dates around the world, but this will describe how you should think about it in Canada, and you can apply it wherever you're at. Quality reviews for individual engagements, and once this was part of SQC1, they've now separated SQM1 and SQM2. And it's effective for year ends beginning on or after December the 15th, 2022. So effectively, that is December 2023 year ends. So, as I said in the module on SQM1, you need to kind of get the forms ready for, and I'm going to say summer or fall of 2022 as kind of a convenient time, get it done. It will be implemented effectively for December 31st, 2023 year ends. The first quality review process you do under SQM1 will be done in the summer or fall, again perhaps of 2023, so you will be reviewing 2022 year ends, which will mean that the individual quality review will have been done the old way that first year. Now, this is mostly the same as it was before. You will certainly need a new set of forms, and if you are the individual responsible for that in your firm, you're going to have to go through this in detail and follow the new detailed wording. There are more parts and more words, but it's mostly the same. Perhaps I think it is less specific and leaves more to the judgment of the quality reviewer, though often folks who talk about this present it as if it's all new and never been heard of before. This is the process that was informally called second partner review. It's now engagement quality review, and we'll have an engagement quality review reviewer. The nature, timing, and extent of the review may vary. That's in paragraph 4, one of the first things they say, so we will take that to heart. You may scale the responses, paragraphs 5, 6, and 7, and it repeats a lot of what is in SQM1. And the purpose is narrow. The EQRr reviewer is only reviewing significant judgments, not the whole file. And to quote, however, an engagement quality review is not intended to be an evaluation of whether the entire engagement complies with professional standards and applicable legal and regulatory requirements, or with the firm's policies and procedures. So it's by definition a narrow scope project, and it makes the EQRr reviewer's job kind of, you got a narrow path to tread, I guess, and we'll see that in a couple of places later on. Now, you're not a member of the team. That is the same as before. You are not responsible for the audit conclusion. The engagement partner is to tell the reviewer what is going on, but not to consult with the reviewer. If you consult with the reviewer, you compromise the reviewer's independence, so don't do that. If you need to consult with someone else. Requirements for the firm and the EQRr reviewer. That's what the second little r means. You shall have an understanding. And the firm having an understanding, like the firm can be a corporation, so a corporation can't understand anything. So that must mean someone within the firm has an understanding. And I guess the documentation and the proof of that someone had an understanding is that the firm has a form. So kind of makes mandatory having an EQRr form. And of course, having an understanding is less than understanding. If you said the firm and the EQRr reviewer shall understand every piece of the entire section, that would be a tall hurdle. If you just say you have to have an understanding, that's less than that, so that's easier to get. Now the firm or the EQRr reviewer are to comply, and again I think that means the firm has to have a checklist and appoint a reviewer, and the reviewer has to fill out the checklist. Further actions are taken as determined by the firm and the reviewer. And a competent person is supposed to appoint a competent reviewer. Makes sense. And you are to have a system. The firm is to have policies and procedures. These are the policies you're supposed to have. The reviewer is not on the audit team, not a member of the engagement team. The reviewer has to be competent and have sufficient time and authority to do their job. The reviewer has to be independent, for instance, isn't consulted. And the firm will comply with laws and regulations if there are any. There may be or there may not be. There is a required 2-year cooling off period, which is the same as before. You can't be the engagement quality reviewer until 2 years after you are on the team. And be very careful with that. That's not to be played with. Find someone else. Assistance to the reviewer. Now, I've been a partner at both a big firm and a small firm, an international firm and a small firm. And my first reaction to this was, well, why would you have assistants? There's only one. You're dealing with a small client at a small firm. And so that's true. Probably there will be no assistance in a small firm. But in a large firm, an international firm, where you've got hundreds of subsidiaries around the globe, a single person in a single city couldn't possibly do this. So you are going to have many assistants to the reviewer, the main reviewer, and they may well be partners in other locations or senior managers in other locations. So in a large firm, international firm, there are probably going to be many, many assistants to the individual who's appointed the reviewer. Again, the firm has to have policies and procedures. The reviewer has the overall responsibility for the review, but doesn't have to do it all, and is responsible for the nature, time, and extent of the review, and for the supervision of assistants. And as I said, again, in a large firm, there'll be lots of them. In a small firm, maybe only a single person. You are to replace the reviewer if they become unqualified. That would seem to make sense. The reviewer is to report to the firm if they become unqualified, so you turn yourself in if you become not independent for some reason. Firm policy, again, there has to be lots of firm policy here apparently. The policy is that the reviewer has to do it right, properly, that the engagement partner is not to date the report until the review is done, so the review has to be completed before the financial statements can be issued. That's the same as before. And policies on what to do if a reviewer becomes too involved, and that is to replace the reviewer. And again, this is a really fine line for the reviewer to tread. You've got to be involved enough to conclude that significant judgments are okay, but not too involved. So it's a fine line to tread. What the review is to include, you are to read and get an understanding of info about the engagement and the entity, about the annual monitoring and remediation, if anything came out of the annual monitoring process. Now, hopefully, if the particular client was selected for monitoring, nothing came out of it, though the odds of an individual client being selected would be low because you're only going to do 1 or 2 per partner a year. You are to discuss significant matters and judgments with the engagement partner and the team, and there's no specification in the standard of what those matters might be. It's left to the judgment of the reviewer. You are to review selected documentation and evaluate, and again, There's no specification of what you have to look at. That's up to you. So the reviewer, when we talk about the reviewer being competent, they've got to be competent enough to figure out what to look at and what documents to look at. You have to evaluate judgments and professional skepticism, whether documentation supports the conclusions, and again, you're not going to look at everything. So if the selected documentation seems to support the conclusions, that's okay, and whether the conclusions are appropriate. For financial statement audits, if ethics have been followed, and did appropriate consultation take place, not with you, but with someone else. For financial statement audits, evaluate the engagement partner's evaluation of whether or not the engagement partner was sufficiently involved. Again, in a small firm, the engagement partner is probably going to be very involved. If you're talking a large international firm and a large international audit with hundreds of subsidiaries, the engagement partner's involvement is going to be very different and at a higher level, so that's fine. And you are to review for financial statement audits the statements and the report. If you are doing an EQRr on a review engagement, same thing. And for other engagements, same thing. The financial statements are the items involved and the report thereon. The reviewer is to notify the engagement partner if the reviewer has concerns. If those concerns are not resolved, then you notify the firm. And if the review is complete and there are no concerns, and hopefully that's what happens every time, you notify the engagement partner. Documentation, there's a list, do it. The test of the experienced person is there. Despite the specification of that we've just seen of the things that you have to do, this is all the standards say you have to document. You have to document the names of the reviewer and any assistants. So on a standard form you should do that, and it should call you to document it, and you should do it. You identify any documents reviewed, and I think rather than have the standard form specify these are the 5 documents you are to review, talk about that in a sec, I think the standard form just says attach or identify the documents you reviewed. The basis for your conclusion, and I think the basis for your conclusion is the documents you reviewed. So you would say, I base my conclusion on the review that I did and documented. You have to notify that things are okay or not. Presumably things are okay, and implicit in the form will be notification of the engagement partner that they can proceed. Date of completion, and that again should be on the form, because you've got to know that date, because it's got to be on the day of or before the date the audit report is dated. So this is less specific than before, perhaps, and the reviewer will have to decide what to look at and attach it rather than being prompted. Now I thought about this, and I think there's a risk of being too prescriptive. For the firm to say, okay, we've decided you should look at 1, 2, 3, materiality, the audit plan, and something else. Those are the 3 things you should look at. And there is a list of things that you may look at in the appendix, and remember that may means the same as may not. So if it says you may look at materiality, that equally means you may not look at materiality. So the may word is not prescriptive at all, and there's no requirement in it. And I think the thing I've concluded is if you specify 3 things to look at and other things in your own judgment, the risk is probably going to be that you'll look at those 3 and say, oh, I guess those are the 3 I had to look at and I've done enough. There may be other important things to look at. So the standard setters seem to have left it to the judgment of the reviewer, and I think the firm should too. If the reviewer is not smart enough to figure this out, then they're unqualified and they shouldn't be a reviewer. So I think the simple solution is you will say in the form, I looked at the matters I have described in the attached document and the attached form, or the attached pieces of paper or electronic documents or whatever, And because I'm competent to be an engagement quality review reviewer, I'm competent to figure out what I should look at or not look at. So is this new or not? No, it's not particularly new. It's a bit more detail. It's often presented by people as being entirely brand new when it's not. What the firm can prescribe in a form is very general, probably more general than it was before. This may be less specific than it was before. And I can only assume that this is deliberate, that the standard setters said, let's let the reviewer decide what to do and what to document. So there are more words in detail. This affects the words in the form. But again, I would say much the same, repeated, or in greater detail. So, thanks for listening.